On this week's edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast, the Pistons drop a very winnable game to the Charlotte Hornets. Are we concerned about Cade Cunningham's ability to close games in the fourth quarter? And Jalen Duren is injured again. What does that mean for the Detroit Pistons? We'll talk about all of that and more coming up next on the Palace of Pistons podcast.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another exciting night of NBA basketball.
The Pistons are digging in. They got the depth. They got the big men. They got the better basketball team. No doubt about it.
Pistons need a three, and they have just under 3 seconds to do it. Here's Chauncey Billups. Here it is. He's got it. He's got it. Chauncey Billups hits the three. Overtime. Amazing.
Out of bounds. Detroit basketball.
Pistons fans, welcome back to another edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast, brought to you by Believe. It's myself, Aaron Johnson, and joining me is Jasper Apollonia to break down everything that's gone on in what's been an eventful week of Detroit Pistons basketball. Jasper, we've got a lot of different things to touch on today. What's the vibe right now for you in watching this Detroit Piston team at the start of the new season?
Oh man, it's one of those things where sometimes you get exactly what you're expecting and somehow you still find yourself being disappointed. It's like that occasionally, and I think that's kind of where we're at with the Pistons seasons right now. It is exactly what I think we thought it would be. It's been up and down, a lot of growing pains, some moral victories. I think some good, perhaps even unexpected actual victories on the court, but you're still seeing the growing pains that are going to come along with being a young team, especially one that is trying to make their way back from an absolutely disastrous season last year. So I think, with an organization that's been so down in the dumps over the last decade and a half as the Detroit Pistons have been, I think the fan base gets a little bit worn out after a while, but frankly, with where they're at in the season right now, I think you have to be feeling pretty good overall about where Detroit is. Aaron, is that the same thing for you? Are you hitting the panic button already? I would think that panic button would be pretty worn out at this point for the last decade and a half.
Yeah, we've seen some pretty bad Detroit Pistons basketball, so I don't know if I can sit here and look at the Pistons at a 3-6 record and look back at how previous years played out and be like, oh, right now I'm hitting the panic button. But I think this has been an interesting start to the season because while I'm in an optimistic mindset with this team overall because I think the direction that they're heading in is as clear as we've seen it in recent history. I also understand those that maybe are a bit pessimistic right now. They look at some of the losses that they have on the season. They look at, hey, they're 3-6, but there's a world where the Pistons could be 500. And they're the 10th seed right now in the Eastern Conference. Yeah, they're in the play-in technically, but if they win a couple more games, they're outside of the play and they're actually in the playoffs right now, not having to worry about playing in the play-in. And while the season's very long and the records are going to change, I think people are rightfully so pessimistic about this team's ability to close basketball games, which is something that we are going to talk about a lot today. And it starts with the Detroit Pistons and how they played against the Charlotte Hornets. That's where we're going to start breaking down the show or breaking down how the Pistons have performed. But before we do that, we have to give our word to our always loyal sponsors, Bet Online. Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen. With the largest selection of odds from football, NBA, and college basketball, NHL to UFC and MMA, head to BetOnline today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. BetOnline, the game starts here. Speaking of betting, I was at the Lakers-Pistons game a few days ago, and I had an interesting slip. I had a Cade Cunningham triple-double slip, and he hit. It hit. It was a nice little payout. Just thought I'd mention that. I like to talk about my wins amidst most of my bets being losses. I have to point out the few times that I get a shot to fall. Call me Tobias Harris from the 3-point line right now. But Jasper, anything betting wise you wanna talk about the Pistons? You got any nice wins lately you want to highlight?
Oh, well, you said nice win, so no, nothing there. No,
It's tough
I
out there.
unfortunately I went a little heavier. I missed a brutal slip against the Brooklyn Nets. I had like five different things, and I missed Cade Cunningham points plus assists by 1 point plus assist, point or assist. So that was a tough little loss on Sunday, but no, overall, I've just been trying to look. The Pistons disappoint me enough as is. I don't need to bring my money into it as often as some of us do. So, yeah, definitely that was a bit of a heartbreaker.
It
But
always comes down
hey,
to parlay.
I you could have rolled that triple double into another triple double slip
Okay.
against the Charlotte Hornets last night, or I guess 2 nights ago when this is going to be released. You would have been looking at a real nice return once again. Yeah.
It was well last I think against the Hornets it was like plus 1600. I mean, great odds. You know, it's not gonna hit all the time, but hey, you like to sprinkle some stuff, you like to play some long shots. Not a bad bet right now with the way he's playing. But we're not gonna talk too much more about betting because we've got to talk about the actual game. Before we do that, I do also want to give a quick word. Wherever you're watching, wherever you're listening from, give me 5 seconds of your time to go hit the subscribe button, hit the follow button, to leave a like on the video, to leave a 5-star rating, to leave a comment, to leave a review. Give me that 10, 15, 20 seconds it might take to do any of those actions and help support Palace of Pistons. We really do need our viewers. A lot of you that watch or a lot of you that listen are not actually subscribed, which is crazy to me. How could you not be subscribed? Please, please, please give us a quick help and hit one of those buttons, whether it's the follow, the like, the subscribe, 5-star rating, anything. Go smash those buttons and help us out. After that, we can get into the first topic, which is just talking about that Charlotte game for Detroit. The Pistons, a chance to extend their winning streak to 3, something that I don't even know if I can recall the last time they've done that. It feels like it's been so long since they've had a 3-game winning streak, and the game just turned upside its head as it started. I mean, LaMelo Ball, who was questionable to play, it sounded like he wasn't going to play. All of a sudden, he warmed up. He was active. A minute into the game, Jalen Duren gets hurt. He ends up not returning after the first quarter. Jaden Ivey got hurt at one point. The Hornets were playing with no Nick Richards, no Mark Williams. They started former Detroit Piston Taj Gibson at center. They were playing Grant Williams at center. It was just a very odd game. And somehow the Pistons found themselves leading down the stretch, yet they lose on a Brandon Miller offensive rebound, tap in at the buzzer. And that's where I want to start, actually. I want to start where it ended. I've seen a lot of discussion on Twitter about that closing lineup that JB Bickerstaff had on the court for that final possession. Malik Beasley was the one that Brandon Miller got around to tap that in. A lot of people are wondering why JB Bickerstaff didn't go with a bigger, more defensive lineup, having, Paul Reed, Isaiah Stewart, Ron Holland, having all of their longer, more athletic defender types out there on the court. Jasper, were you put off by that lineup? Was that a big deal? Do you think that played a factor in how that final play ended up playing out?
Yeah, I certainly think it did. Look, I saw people saying like, "Oh, well, Isaiah Stewart should have been there." I don't think that was necessarily the case. Like, I understand perhaps what the logic behind JB Bickerstaff's decision to run with Malik Beasley was. LaMelo Ball was absolutely on fire in the fourth quarter. Like, he was doing his LaMelo Ball thing, man, just hitting these like one-legged fadeaways, like crazy shooting. And so I can understand where maybe JB was like, look, they're going to try and get the ball into LaMelo Ball's hands. Pistons like to switch everything. I want to have somebody out there who can defend on the perimeter. I can somewhat understand that logic, except the Hornets got a wide open three with Grant Williams anyway. So and then they didn't box out. So I think for me it was a miscalculation by JB Bickerstaff. I don't like that he did that, especially since Malik Beasley was just not having a good game on either end of the court, regardless. So like I didn't really see why you would have him out there at the very end. That being said, like the Pistons had chances to win that game otherwise. Like the fact, I guess, like the only thing is like, would you have rather lost that on the tip-in where you didn't box out, which has been a really an issue for the Pistons at the end of games this year. It's really odd to me because they have one of the best rebounding margins in the entire league. However, it seems like in these end of game situations, I'm specifically thinking against the Boston Celtics, and now I'm thinking about this game as well. They've struggled to close out and get these crucial rebounds at the end of games. It's cost them dearly. I think it's cost them 2 wins at this point. So would you rather go down that way or have Grant Williams hit a wide open three against you? It really was a pick your poison kind of situation there. Aaron, where are you at with that? Because I think overall I come down on the side of like, I would have liked to have had somebody other than Malik Beasley out there.
Yeah, and I get the perspective. I get the want to have your bigger, more athletic defenders, rebounders out there in the court, and I think that makes sense. That being said, I just, you got beat by not boxing out. Like JB Bickerstaff shouldn't have to put in Ron Holland to box out. Like Malik Beasley's a veteran. He's played in the playoffs. He's played in close games. Like the first thing you do on a shot like that is find a man, tag a man, turn and put a body on someone. Malik Beasley did the exact opposite. Is it different if Ron Holland's in the game? Is it different if it's Tim Hardaway Jr.? Like I don't know. I get the want. I get the, in theory you should have your best defenders, your biggest guys. But asking someone or expecting someone to box out in that situation, especially someone who's been in these types of moments before, like I really think it's just a lapse on Beasley. I don't think it's like a super egregious mistake by JB Bickerstaff, because if Malik Beasley gets that rebound or swats the ball away or whatever, we're not having this conversation. No one's even thinking about it. So I think it's a bad play by a player that should have known better. And that's the unfortunate side of it. I think it's more maybe why was Malik Beasley on the court overall, considering he was 2 of 11 from the field and was just missing look after look. I don't know why he was in the game in that regard. I just don't think if I'm JB Bickerstaff, I'm like, I need to put in guys that are going to box out, because everyone should be boxing out in that situation. It's just such it's the first thing you think of when you're in the huddle. It's like, hey, we've got to box out here, no second chances. And to make matters worse, like you said, the Pistons gave up a wide open three to Grant Williams. I mean, if a halfway decent NBA player caught that ball and shot it, like that's going in. The Pistons were lucky it was Grant Williams that caught that ball. But it's the Pistons' fault that they lost that game, because they had so many chances. Charlotte was just as banged up as Detroit was, and LaMelo Ball went absolutely nuclear against Detroit in the fourth quarter. I think he had 15 in the fourth, and he just hit these insanely difficult 3-point shots. The Pistons kept switching on screens. LaMelo kept going and pulling up right as the switch happened. He was spectacular in the fourth quarter for Charlotte. That takes me to something that we have to hit on later, which is Cade Cunningham in the fourth quarter. But before we do that,
why don't we talk about that right now? Because I think it does kind of go hand in hand with that very same discussion. Because look, we're getting a lot of talk on Twitter, Facebook, whatever it is, whatever your social media platform of choice is. People talking about like Cade Cunningham at the end of games. It's been a topic of conversation. And frankly, like at this point, I don't really know where to come down on it. I'm kind of still in the same boat of like, look, Cade Cunningham's a fantastic player. The Pistons still have the same issues that they have had for the last couple of years in terms of like when he gets going, everybody collapses on him in the paint, and it's on his teammates to hit wide open shots, which just hasn't been happening. Like, let's be honest. Like Tobias Harris, Malik Beasley, two guys that the Pistons brought in this offseason. These guys are shooting, 11 and a half threes per game almost. They're shooting 27% combined. Like they've hit 28 of 102 threes this season, Tobias Harris and Malik Beasley have. So those guys just straight up like have not been performing on a consistent basis from outside. It just hasn't been happening for Detroit. But you're getting a lot of talk around Cade not being able to be the guy at the end of games. You know, where is Cade taking over in the fourth quarter? And I think last night, I think it's incredibly irresponsible to put that loss on him. Like they win that game if Malik Beasley boxes out. That's it. That's all they had to do. And they blew it on that, not because of anything Cade Cunningham did. But when you look on the other end of the court and you have LaMelo Ball hitting these absolutely absurd shots, scoring 15 points to not just keep the Hornets in it, but ultimately help deliver them the win. And Cade is not able to do that. I think that there are people that are going to just naturally have questions about it. And I'm still on the boat of like, I think Cade Cunningham is an alpha dog. I think he's a team leader. I think that he is absolutely like an all-star, potentially all-NBA kind of player at the end of the day. There's still things he needs to clean up, but he's a fantastic player. He's clearly the best player on this team. That being said, there is a lack of that LaMelo Ball thing to him where he's able to pull up and hit these ridiculous threes, these ridiculous shots at the end of games. He's able to get into his bag. He's able to score at the rim. He's able to do a lot of great things. We saw it in the first half. But when it comes to hitting these ridiculous shots, these tough shots, when teams are draped all over him and daring him to make the bucket in order to get the Pistons over the hump, it hasn't really been there this season. So Aaron, where are you right now in regards to Cade Cunningham at the end of games? Or maybe not even just the end of games, maybe a broader discussion. Is Cade, quote unquote, the guy?
He is for this team. And I am as stout of a believer in Cade Cunningham as I think you'll find out there. I think when you look at the Pistons roster, he is just so clearly the best player on this team. He has had big time performances. He has had, as of late, in 2 wins against Brooklyn and against the Lakers, big performances in the fourth quarter. But against Charlotte, it was bad. And it's not the first time this year that Cunningham has been completely bottled up in the fourth quarter. There have been other games earlier this season. Boston, and what was the other one? I can't remember. But there was a number of games this year that Cunningham has just not been able to impact the game, at least scoring-wise, in the fourth quarter. You know, yesterday in the second half, he just could not buy a bucket. His finishing fell off a cliff. He was 0-4 from the three-point line. He still did a really good job distributing the basketball. He helped on the glass. But as the guy, you have to be able to score the ball in the fourth quarter, and he was not able to do that for the Detroit Pistons. And I'm okay with looking at that and saying that plays a factor in why they just didn't have Charlotte closed out ahead of time. And that's why Charlotte had that opportunity to win the game that they ended up converting on. Like, yeah, the Pistons should have boxed out and they should have won the game, but they should have won it beforehand. If LaMelo Ball is able to score 15 in the fourth quarter, Cade Cunningham has to be able to get you a couple buckets, and he just got completely bottled up. I'm not like panicking about it because he just had 2 games where he played well and scored in the fourth quarter, but it's been a talking point around him. It was a talking point last year. It's been a talking point this year that I've seen very heavily discussed online. And the Charlotte game was another example of that. That being said, they just don't make shots. The team doesn't make shots. Tobias Harris is shooting sub 17% from the three-point line. Simone Fontecchio, 31% from the three-point line. Malik Beasley, who started the year red hot, down to 33% from the three-point line. He's been trending in a very negative direction there. Isaiah Stewart, not really attempting too many threes, but hasn't made one this year anyway. Cade Cunningham is below 35%. They have one rotation guy. They play 9 guys in their rotation regularly, and I think it's one player that shoots above the league average from the three-point line, and that's Tim Hardaway Jr. Maybe
Hey, put some respect. Yeah, Jaden Ivey. I was going to say, let's put some respect on what Jaden Ivey is doing this year, because he's been a consistent and very dangerous deep threat.
Both of them are over 40%, but in their 9-man rotation, everyone else is below that. 7 of the guys are below that. And that's just not good enough to win you a lot of games. You know, the Pistons didn't take a ton of threes yesterday. They had a lot of success scoring at the rim, especially in the first half. But when the Hornets defense interior picked up, the Pistons were not hitting shots, and that's just not a winning recipe. And that's not on just Cade Cunningham. That's on all these other guys as well. But to wrap this up, I think it's fair if you're frustrated that Cade Cunningham can't take over a game seemingly like a LaMelo Ball can. And I've watched LaMelo Ball do that a couple times this year. I'm trying to think who he did it against most recently. I want to say it was against the Boston Celtics, who he had a nuclear fourth quarter against and led them back into the game that they were trailing by significantly. So he's had a couple good fourth quarters, but he's had more bad fourth quarters. And I'm okay with there being a little bit of like, hey, what the heck? You've got to be able to get us a few baskets. You're a $200 million player.
Yeah, I think that's a legitimate at this point. Like, just it's not necessarily just like a results-based thing. Like, it's easy to look at the numbers and go, well, he's not playing well in the fourth quarter. I think it's more of like you have to look at his skill set and what he brings to the table. And I think that there is a very legitimate reason to worry about that, because he's not a hyper athlete. He is not somebody who is a big time volume 3-point shooter, and the 3-point shots that he does get, they have to be good looks. Like, they're more, one-on-one occasional pull up, but he's trying to get into the lane. And that's what Cade Cunningham's game is more predicated on, getting into the lane, distributing the ball. I think that there is a definite reason why he is struggling at the end of games. And I think it's A, like you said, the veterans just haven't been shooting well. And I think B, I think it's legitimate to wonder if he does need that second guy next to him. Maybe, maybe the 1A to his 1B. Maybe he's more of a distributor and he needs somebody out there who can also just say like, hey, give me the ball. I'm going to take these tough shots. I'm going to, make these hoops. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. Like, I still think you can be a max player and not. Chris Paul was never a, hey, let me get the ball and then, jack it up past the 3-point line, one-on-one. No, he was never that. But he was still a great player. He was still somebody who was able to be the cornerstone of championship contending teams. The thing is, he had other guys around him, and the Pistons don't really have that. Like, Cade does not have a Peja Stojakovic. Cade does not have like a JJ Redick in his lineup right now. He doesn't have somebody that they can go to. And while I think Jaden Ivey has been very good, I don't necessarily trust him in those situations either. So yeah, I think that the questions around Cade's ability to close out games on a consistent basis, I think they're legitimate. I think there is something to them. But that being said, I don't think that precludes him from being a max player, like somebody who's worthy of that max contract. I don't think that precludes him from being somebody that you can build a team around. I think it just means that in the next year or two, there has to be a concerted effort to get that guy in there. And I think that it's going to have to be somebody who's like a wing scorer, like kind of what you were hoping you'd get from Tobias Harris this year, a Brandon Ingram, a Zach LaVine, whoever it may be.
That's what I was going to say is that's part of the reason why they brought in Tobias Harris. They signed him to help this team learn how to win, to help this team close out games. Not that he had to be the number one option, but the Pistons are not getting nearly enough from him. He's started to find his groove in terms of scoring inside the arc, finishing at the rim, hitting a few mid-range jumpers, but the three-point shot has to be there for him. You know, even if he was only shooting 35%, he's shooting 16% right now. It's unacceptable for a guy as good as he is. And they're certainly playing a factor in this team's inability to close out games, because having him out there, being able to kick out to a guy that just quite frankly is not hitting open looks right now. He's missing wide open shots. That obviously is really, really hurting this team. So it's on Cade, but it's on the rest of this team as well to start closing these games. Let's move on. I want to talk about an injury concern that I feel like we've talked about at numerous times in every season that he's been a Detroit Piston, and it's surrounding Jalen Duren, who suffered an ankle sprain in the loss to the Hornets. Currently considered day-to-day, being evaluated on a day-to-day basis. Sounds like we could get some more information on Friday morning when this drops regarding Duren's status moving forward. But Jalen Duren's hurt again. It's an ankle injury, something that has impacted him every season he's been in the league. Are we concerned that this is not just a one-off issue? It's obviously been an issue in the past. Are we concerned about the longevity when we're talking about Jalen Duren, his availability? You start thinking about the contract that he's going to be eligible to sign in the offseason, and you pair that with the slow start that he's had to the season just in terms of production. It feels like we're trending in the wrong direction with Jalen Duren.
We were talking about the panic button earlier, brother. The panic button's starting to stick because we've been pressing it so much, okay? The letters are starting to fade. The paint is starting to chip. I'm pounding that panic button based on where Jalen Duren is at right now. Look, it's been a very slow start to the season for him. He picked things up a little bit, I would say, in the last few games. I thought he played well in the second half against Brooklyn. Like, that being said, he's still being outplayed by Isaiah Stewart. He was outplayed by Isaiah Stewart against the Lakers. He's been outplayed by him for the vast majority of this season. This is his 9th ankle injury. 9 ankle injuries. He's 20 years old. I'm sorry, this is just something that you cannot overlook. It's not something that you can hand wave. There is no amount of youth or inexperience that can make up for this. If anything, the youth and inexperience makes it even more concerning because he is this young. And last night was not an injury where, he freak accident, he steps on someone's foot and twists his ankle. Dude, he just landed for the rebound and twisted his ankle, and it just went. And it's just like, at this point, I am extremely worried about Jalen Duren. I think Jalen Duren's team should be worried about Jalen Duren, and I think the Pistons front office should be extremely worried about Jalen Duren. I said it a couple weeks ago, I think we are rapidly approaching Sadiq Bey levels of we might just have to get whatever we can get for this guy because we can't afford to pay him. And I look at the underlying numbers for him defensively. His defense has never been good at any point in his NBA career. Something's up with Cade Cunningham's lob game this year, by the way. I don't know what's going on. The guy can't throw a good lob to save his life. I don't know what's up with that. I have been noticing it, but Jalen Duren has not really been a threat in the lob game. They rebound better when he's off the floor. I'd say Stewart's on the floor. Those on-off splits are staggering. And if he's hurt all the time, what are we looking at? What are we looking at for a potential extension? Because it's on the table after this year. Would you feel comfortable even paying him what Isaiah Stewart makes? $15 million a year? And he's not going to want $15 million a year. He's going to say, I'm the starter. So I should be getting at least $20 million a year. Do you want to be the guy who pays a 21-year-old with 9 and counting ankle injuries and diminishing defense every single year in the league with some of the worst underlying metrics for young big men, like historically bad defensive metrics? Forget the rebounding. We're talking blocks and steals. Doesn't prevent anything at the rim. Hasn't, does a good job with his dribble handoff game, but isn't some elite screener. Turns the ball over a lot. Is this a guy you want to pay $20 million a year to, Aaron? I'm very, very concerned. Very concerned.
And I think people have a right to be concerned because it's not been good this year. When Jalen Duren was drafted, it was like, how did this guy fall to 14? The intangibles that he has, the size that he has. He might be raw, but he's going to be a special, special player. And I don't think the Pistons have failed him developmentally. I think they have tried to create a foundation for him. They've obviously given him many chances. They've tried different lineups to try to maximize him. They've given him opportunities within the offense. This year, JB Bickerstaff's really tried to empower him by putting the ball in his hands a little bit more. It's just not worked out yet. And it's hard for me to sit here and say, give up on this 7-foot 20-year-old that's had some of the performances that he's had. But I also understand that health-wise, he's had issues every year. We could end up getting to tomorrow or Saturday or next Monday and it'd be like, okay, he's out. He's going to be out for another day or two, but he's back. He might miss 2 games, 3 games. And that might be it. And it might be, okay, well, then it really wasn't that big of a deal. But look at the history, and it's just concerning. So I understand the concerns. And then you start looking at the production that he's failed to have this year because he's been wildly unproductive. He's been in foul trouble. He's been exploited defensively. I'm as concerned as you are when it comes to like committing financially to this guy long term. Is that the right move? I don't know, because I don't think you're looking at a $15 million contract. I think you're looking at closer to a $25 million a year type of contract. And I just don't think he has proven that he's worth that. And so if he's missing extended time with another ankle sprain, that just continues to add to the concern of the wear and tear that his body has gone through. And then you're staring down looking at a $100 million contract plus. So I'm not in a great spot with Jalen Duren. I know he was one of the guys that we talked about a lot in the offseason. Is like, hey, this might be a make or break year for this guy. He's really got to show he's improved. And Jalen Duren has yet to do that. He's injured again. I think it's okay to be concerned. If you're hitting the panic button right now, I don't really know how to soothe things over for you because I'm very close there with you. I'm maybe just holding out a little bit of hope that he is 20 years old, playing for his 3rd coach in 3 years, and is just trying to figure some things out. But it's just not been good. It's not been good enough. And I'm sitting here waiting for things to get better, and I can't confidently tell you that they will.
I mean, look, 20 years old, yes, but like he's 20 years old with 9 ankle injuries in the NBA. He's played 137 games. He has 9 ankle injuries. I just did the math. That's 1 ankle injury every 15 games, Aaron. Like, how can you do that? How can you commit to a guy who, over the course of an 82 game season, will, just mathematically speaking, get injured once every 15 games? That's 5 ankle injuries a year. God knows how many games he's missing in between them. Like that's if you just, kept on going for all 82 games. I don't see how you can feasibly commit to a player like that. Like, ankle injuries are not something that just happen as freak accidents. Maybe once or twice. Yes. But chronic ankle injuries there is a well-documented history. Basically, like, the only guy who's ever escaped the curse of ankle injuries is Steph Curry. He's basically the only one. And that's because he completely, like, changed the way that he was running and planting his feet and all that. Like he had to make fundamental changes. Steph Curry's also not, crashing the glass every single night. That's not his game. Jalen Duren has to be physical in order to succeed in the NBA. And I've already seen this year, like there's been less of a willingness to be physical on the boards, all that stuff. Like I think he is a little mentally wary of getting hurt. And it's already happened. We're not even 10 games into the season right now. Like it's ridiculous, man. It's crazy. And I think also when you talk about making that financial commitment, like you have to look at the rest of the roster as well and where Jalen Duren truly fits in there. Like, is Jalen Duren a better fit with what they have right now than an alternative might be? I don't know if that's the case. When you look at, like, yes, obviously what he brings in terms of like rebounding and interior threat as a lob threat, that's great. But Jaden Ivey's not some guy that throws up a whole bunch of lobs. He needs a clear path to the rim. Cade Cunningham needs spacing in order to get to the rim. Like he's more of a paint-based point guard. And I think when you also take into account the development of players like Ron Holland, who, by the way, was awesome last night and was awesome against the Lakers, primarily without Jalen Duren on the floor, mind you, and Asar Thompson and what those guys bring and what they could potentially develop into for this team, I don't really know how Jalen Duren fits with that. Like, I think that there is a much better archetype of player that works with those guys. Asar Thompson is a player that loves to cut, that crashes the glass a lot, especially on offense. Somebody that you want finishing, somebody that his best type of individual offensive production came from those little turnaround fadeaways in the paint. All of those things do not mesh with what Jalen Duren really brings to your squad. What works better for you is somebody who can space the floor, who can protect the rim, who can provide, something outside of just rebounding and lobs. More of like a Miles Turner type, even an Isaiah Stewart. So like where I'm at right now, I just think the Pistons really have to think about looking at that trade market for Jalen Duren. And I don't know what it looks like right now. His trade value is awfully low, but unlike Jaden Ivey coming into this year, I don't see the path to rehabbing that image, that trade value being nearly as easy. With Ivey, it was just like put up numbers, show that you're like the guy that you looked like coming out of college. With Duren, it's like you need to see such drastic improvement from him in so many ways.
Well, I'll just say this, and then I want to talk about how the potential injury impacts this team's rotation. I looked across the league at teams, and I looked at who needs a center, and it's like outside of the Pelicans, I don't really know who's giving you anything for Jalen Duren in terms of like it's worth making the deal. I mean, teams would give you something for him. This is a guy that has been in Team USA twice. Obviously, there's belief that he is a player, but it just hasn't happened yet. And I don't know if they're really going to get a great return on investment with the way that he's playing. And I also just look at the league and I go down the list. This team has a solidified center. This team has their own young center that they're working with, or this team has a solidified center and a young center that they're also bringing along. So it's like the center is like they're a dime a dozen really at this point. So I just don't know what they're getting for him right now. So there's a lot of season left. We could get to February, March, April and be saying something completely different on him. But it has been a rough start to the season for Duren. And now that he's staring down a potential absence from the starting lineup, from the rotation, how does Detroit's rotation change? Is it as simple as Isaiah Stewart slides into the starting spot, Paul Reed then takes the backup spot? Is there a world where Paul Reed slides into the starting spot and Isaiah Stewart comes off the bench? Do the Pistons go super small and maybe start Stewart? Maybe Paul Reed's still on the outside of the rotation. I don't know who else gets slid into the rotation for him. It's already a pretty tight rotation at 9 from JB Bickerstaff. How does the rotation change if Duren's missing time?
Well, I think you saw last night, especially against smaller teams, just how effective Paul Reed can be in the right situations. Like that was a perfect situation for Paul Reed to get the first meaningful minutes of this NBA season. I thought he was extremely helpful. Like he was a huge part in them staying in that game and having a chance to win it at the end. I think you have to just go Isaiah Stewart is your starter. Paul Reed's coming off the bench, and you have to just live with whatever that means. You're going to struggle against bigger teams. Like there's just no question about it. You don't have anything really that's going to be able to help you when Isaiah Stewart picks up fouls. Like I still think Stewart is a really good defender in against certain types of players. Like Anthony Davis did not play well when guarded by Isaiah Stewart. Isaiah Stewart is also a notorious Giannis stopper. That is not like a fake thing. That is a real thing. He does really, really well against those lanky, more stretchy kind of centers. So against those guys, I think you'll be fine. But like against a Cleveland, like, oh my God, you are going to get eaten up. Like Isaiah Stewart and Paul Reed are going to get eaten up. I just don't think there's anything you can do. Like if you had Asar back for you, I think that you could work with more small ball lineups there because you could say, okay, we can get some rebounding from Asar. Maybe we just go like do what the Hornets did last night, where they played Grant Williams at center and just go crazy and play Asar Thompson at center. I don't know. Hope that he gets you like rebounds and dunks and like just work off that. Would that work? I can't. I don't know. I'd have to see it. But I think as of right now, you just got to shift everybody up in the rotation by one. Isaiah Stewart's your starter. Paul Reed is your backup, and you just have to live with it. I think that's just where you're at right now. How about you, Aaron?
No, I think that makes sense. I mean, I could see the idea of maybe just starting Paul Reed so Isaiah Stewart stays in the role that he's been in, but he's been playing a lot of minutes and a lot of minutes with the starters anyway, considering the times that Jalen Duren has been in foul trouble this year. So I think I'm in agreement. I think it's as simple as you just slide these guys up one spot. I'm interested in the Paul Reed minutes. I think he gave Detroit phenomenal minutes against Charlotte. If there's anything that I've maybe disliked about JB Bickerstaff's rotation, I've been sitting here wondering, when does Paul Reed get his shot? I think he's an NBA player. He was in a NBA rotation for a playoff team last year. I'm not necessarily advocating for the Pistons to have gone out there and used, Stewart and Reed together in the same lineup, but I just think Paul Reed is worthy of NBA minutes. So I am interested to see what he can bring to this team. And quite frankly, with how Duren's played this year, it might sound crazy, but it also might just be a reality. Is it actually going to help the team if Reed can be, similarly productive to how he was against Charlotte? I mean, he was able to score. We know he can help defending around the rim. He can help this team. And with how Jalen Duren's played, I think it's, might be fair to say he might help them a little bit more right now.
It comes down to playing style, though. Like the reason that Paul Reed was so effective last night is that the Pistons kind of had to get out and run and like trade baskets with the Hornets. If you're not playing at a higher pace, I think that Paul Reed becomes a detriment to you, because if you're playing slow and you're getting into half court sets, like he's not going to be able to crash the boards like we said against bigger teams. He's not some great post up player. He does have a nice little like a little over the shoulder hook though. That hook was working for him last night. I just think if you're going to run with Paul Reed out there, like you need to push the pace. You need to get him out in transition, because that's where he was really hurting the Hornets, was when he was able to get out there and run and use his athleticism and surprising, I think, amounts of spring to his step as well. Like that's where he was most effective.
I just don't know if I buy that he's worse for this team in the half court than Jalen Duren was, because outside of finishing at the rim, I don't know exactly what Jalen Duren was giving this team offensively, except for maybe some second chance points around the rim. Like Paul Reed, they might be able to do some different things. Like he can step out, he can hit an outside shot. Yes, you lose some size there, and I think that's the biggest concern with Paul Reed, but I think that hurts them more defensively than it does offensively. Like I think he gives them a little bit more toughness. They lose some size, but Isaiah Stewart's the prototype of, hey, I'll just play very freaking hard. I may be 3, 4, 5, 6 inches shorter than you, but I'm going to be physical. I'm going to use my fouls, and I'm going to try to impact this game as long as I can, as long as I can stay on the court without getting thrown out. So,
Well, that's kind of why I'm thinking like the ideal pairing would be like when Cade comes out of the game and you stagger the Cade Ivey minutes, that you put Paul Reed in the game for Isaiah Stewart in those situations. You know, when Jaden Ivey's out there, it's going to be him, Malik Beasley, Fontecchio, probably Tim Hardaway Jr., somebody else. And they're going to want to like push the pace in those situations. Jaden Ivey wants to push the pace. I think that's when you can best utilize Paul Reed, when you have Jaden Ivey as the more primary creator for you. Versus when Cade's in there and the offense kind of grinds a little bit. I also think like when you push the pace offensively, I think that you force the other team to play with a little bit more pace offensively as well. And like I think that would be better for putting Paul Reed out there. You can grind the possessions a little bit more when you have Stewart. And you play with a little bit more pace when you have Paul Reed out there. I think that that's a good thing. Like I think it's important to switch pace and to switch playing styles against your opponents during the game, because then you can never really let them get into a good rhythm, as long as you're playing at your own pace, right? And that's, I think, the thing that Cade Cunningham, one of the things that I love most about his game, it's like he plays at his pace. You want to be able to do that when you have Stewart and Reed out there on the floor.
the guy that I wanted to talk about, who you mentioned a minute ago, the last guy I wanted to talk about before we wrap the show is Jaden Ivey, because I'm sitting here and I'm wondering, and I looked at the betting market too. I mean, Jaden Ivey in the preseason or in the offseason was plus 8,000 to win most improved player. Last I saw, he was down to plus 1,500, and it might have dropped even more after the Charlotte game, considering how well he's played. I think Jaden Ivey's been spectacular this year, and I think he's in that most improved player of the year award discussion. Would you be in agreement there?
No question. No question. I mean, we still need a little bit more time to see exactly like who else is in that conversation. But I think as of right now, you're looking at his numbers, like, you know, he's scoring what, like 20 points a game, 4 assists, 4 rebounds. He's doing it efficiently too. And his defense, no, it's not great, but it has not been horrendous like it has been in years past. Like he's not noticeably killing them at that end of the floor. I think it's been an improvement there. That's, let's be honest, not usually something that goes into most improved player discussions. It's usually like who scored better. But I think also when you look at what he's bringing to you in terms of outside shooting, it's been a bit of a revelation there. And I said before the season started, don't be surprised if you see Jaden Ivey taking 5+ threes a game and shooting a pretty decent percentage on them. He's doing that right now. He's shooting 5 threes a game. He's shooting 41% from outside. And let's be real, like I think, to me, and I think you'd probably agree, based on just the way he's shooting them, the situations that he's shooting them, the form, the confidence, I think it's sustainable. Like, is he going to be above 40% for the whole season? Maybe not. But do I think 38% plus is in play over the course of the year? I do. Like, based on the looks that he's getting and the way that he's shooting it, I absolutely do. So, yeah, I think Jaden Ivey has to be in that most improved player discussion. After the last couple games from him, I will throw one back at you. He almost had the game-winning bucket last night off of the steal. How are you feeling about potentially Ron Holland's chances in Rookie of the Year voting as well, right? Let's talk about that. He's been looking pretty darn good these last few games. He's coming into his own and even hit a couple threes last night.
Look, I'm impressed with Ron Holland. I think he's very clearly learning how to play the game still. And I watch him out there and I'm looking at him. I'm like, doesn't really know if it doesn't really look like he knows what he's exactly supposed to be doing, but he just somehow figures it out on the fly. He was phenomenal against the Lakers. His finishing was great. The energy that he plays with is great. And the only thing that I came away with from the Lakers game is he had, I think, 5 3-point attempts from the same corner, and he missed them all. And it's like, if he could learn to make a couple of those. Like we're having a discussion like about how good Ron Holland is, like in terms of, can he be an all-star level player? And then the Charlotte game, he actually ended up hitting a few threes, a few big threes. And I'm impressed with him because I was always under the assumption that he was going to spend some time in the G League. And, hey, that still might end up being the case if Asar Thompson comes back. But at the same time, he's also maybe playing himself out of that discussion entirely right now because he's giving Detroit better minutes seemingly every single game. And if he can continue to trend in that direction, that's a real positive for Detroit. I don't think he's going to win the Rookie of the Year award. I think there's some other guys that just are going to have the volume, the minutes. I mean, Zach Edey's already had some really big games this year. There's some other names as well. Zachary Richichet just had a really good performance against the New York Knicks. So I just don't think he's going to have the volume, the minutes, the opportunities necessary to win the award. But that doesn't mean he's not playing some encouraging basketball right now. I did just want to add, I think Ivy is very, very much in the case for most improved player of the year. I think he's been absolutely spectacular. If you really looked at the situation, maybe he's better suited for the comeback player of the year award if this were the NFL, considering the prison that Monty Williams had him in last year. But Ivy's been so good. The 20 points, the 40% three-point shooting. I think he's going to get better finishing around the rim. I think he just sometimes moves a little bit too fast for himself and forces an awkward-looking layup attempt at the rim. He's going to get better at that as time goes on. The one thing that I really wish he could get better at is the turnovers. You look at his assist to turnover ratio. That's probably the most concerning thing for me. But considering the type of player that he was last year to the type of player that he is now, we're looking at two completely different guys. And the signs have just been so encouraging for Ivy. And I'll add that Ivy, and we talked about guys scoring in the fourth quarter, scoring late in games. Jaden Ivey against the Lakers, against the Hornets, against the Nets, he's made big-time shots, big-time three-pointers in these games. So he's comfortable 24/7. He's comfortable in the first, in the second, in the fourth. It doesn't matter for him. I've been really impressed with Jaden Ivey more than anybody on the team this year by an absolute long shot. So if you're a Piston fan, you just have to hope he continues to trend in that direction.
And the fact that they're big time threes as well, like I think speaks a lot to where his confidence is right now as a player. Yeah, I like the comeback player of the year thing. Like they usually give that to somebody who suffered like a debilitating injury the year before. Like Jaden Ivey coming back after shattering his confidence last season.
Yeah, Jaden Ivey is like from a case of Monty Williams.
Exactly. It's like when Adrian Peterson tore his ACL and, came back like 6 months later and they're like, I don't know how he did it. He's got like Teflon knees or something. They cut him open to get the ACLs of a 7-year-old. Like that's Jaden Ivey right now. He's got the confidence of a 7-year-old. He's like, just give me the ball. Let me do it. Like, let me go at him. And I love it. And yeah, I think you're right when you say the turnovers are definitely an issue, but I have at the same time, I think seen a lot of improvement in his handle. That was something that was definitely an issue for him last year and his rookie year as well. Like very sloppy with the handle when he got into the lane. I have not seen nearly as much of that this year. Like I do think the turnovers will go down a little bit. What remains to be seen. He's always gonna, I think, have a little bit of problems with, certain possessions where he's a bit out of control, but that's just something that's gonna come along with being such a hyper athlete. And you're seeing, in my opinion, genuine steps towards improvement in that area, playing under control, playing with a tighter dribble. Last night, one of those turnovers he had came when he was driving into the lane. And I don't know how that was an offensive foul on him. Like he just offensive foul on Jaden Ivey. It looks a little scary. Yeah. I mean, he got, hitting the leg. I can't remember who was defending him, but their knee went into his leg and it was called an offensive foul. I guess he got offensive foul, Jaden Ivey, too athletic. Like, I don't know what the call could have been on that one. That was ridiculous to me. It was obviously a shooting foul. But yeah, I think it's been very, very encouraging from Ivey. No question about it.
All right. Well, that is going to do it for this week's show. But before you go, I do got to ask that you go to the show notes right now, wherever you're watching, wherever you're listening from. Click on the palaceofpistons.com link. That's our Substack. That's our website. That's where you can sign up for free via your email to get all of our content sent directly to your email inbox, free of charge. You're going to get the weekly drive from a podcast co-host, Mike Anglano, who's not here this week. That's his weekly recap talking about the Pistons, the latest games, the latest news, the latest rumors, all of that stuff and a little bit more sent directly to you every Monday. On Wednesday, you're going to get an article. Usually it's from me. This week it was from Dylan Edenfield. You might get another random post here or there as well on another day. And then Friday, you're going to get the podcast sent to you. So go over to our website, palaceofpistons.com. It takes you less than 30 seconds to do. Type in your email and please subscribe. And again, wherever you're watching or listening to the show from, hit the subscribe button there. If you're on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button. Same thing with Spotify. Follow us. Apple Podcasts. Leave us that review. All of those places. Subscribe, follow. It helps us a lot. Leave us that rating. Leave us that review. Greatly appreciate your support as we continue to bring you the show and bring you this content throughout the season. Going to have a special edition show coming at you soon. Not going to go into more details on that, but some exciting stuff coming. Really excited to get that to you guys as well. But that is going to do it for this week's edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast, brought to you by Believe. Don't forget our sponsor, Bet Online. Go over there to get in on the action. For myself, Aaron Johnson, and my co-host, Jasper Apollonia, that is going to do it, folks. And we will see you guys next week for another edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast.